the opening video. So at this time, we're going to turn it over to our welcome from Terry Holloway from Payne Chapel.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We'd like to welcome you all here today. We have a nice crowd. I'm always surprised with the weather. It's wonderful. We'd like to welcome you at our celebration day of Dr. King. And today, hopefully, through all of the programs that we have here on the agenda, that you'll become empowered. That is the key word, empowered. So we thank you again for coming. And if you have any questions, I think we got a panel up here that's going to answer some questions for you. So just sit back and enjoy yourself and make yourself at home. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Would you please bow your heads this morning? God of people and dreams of unity and peace, we pray to Thee for your presence during our time here together today. As members of this community, state, nation, and world band together and remembering one who led a struggle towards freedom, we pray for guidance and the desire to join as brothers and sisters of every creed and every race to join in the journey that has been placed before us today. We give thanks for those who have heard the call to work towards freedom rather than the need of oneself. We bow before you, Lord, in remembrance and thanksgiving for the life and legacy of your faithful servant, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We thank you for his time and efforts to pursue a better world. We thank you for his wisdom to lead, his courage and writings, and most of all, his life that was brought to an end too soon. We rejoice that his legacy in life has endured for the last 50 years. We rejoice that his writings still inspire people of every creed and race, every religion, people of every heritage, the young, the old, the poor, the rich, to realize that injustice is a threat to justice everywhere. In light of the act of unity and harmony not yet achieved, God, we give you thanks and offer our continued prayers for those who work towards diversity. Strengthen them as they work towards enabling Dr. King's dream of togetherness and unity as one human family. Help each of us to follow the model with living our lives that we may join others in the cause. Lord, give us the same courage that Dr. King taught and lived by. Lord, give us the same courage to live by what we profess and believe, and to accept the teachings of Dr. King and your Son, Jesus Christ. As the songwriter wrote, we shall overcome, we will walk hand in hand, we shall live in peace, we are not afraid. God will see us through. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we will walk hand in hand someday. God, grant us strength and courage to live out the commitment to create a world of peace and justice that flows like a mighty stream. We ask all of this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen.
Amen.
We have two proclamations to be presented. One from the Kenton mayor. Come on up. And I just drew a blank on your name.
It's okay, I'm not the Kenton mayor.
That I do know.
But I am pleased to be here as his representative. I'm Dave Beasley, Kenton City Council, and I would like to read the following proclamation from the mayor's office. Whereas Dr. Martin Luther King was an honorable man with an unshaken belief in the integrity and future of this great nation, and whereas Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spent his life teaching and ministering the importance and absolute need of basic fundamental rights of equality and freedom for all, now therefore I, Randy Manns, Mayor of the City of Kenton, Ohio, do hereby proclaim January 15th, 2018 as a day to reflect on the teachings and work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Further, I call upon our citizens to work together participating in projects that will enhance our neighborhoods and the prosperity of our community for future generations. Under the signature of Mayor Mans.
And Rob Radway, I said it right this morning, will present the proclamation from the County Commissioners.
This proclamation is from the Board of the Hardin County Commissioners, and it reads as follows. On behalf of this Board of the Hardin County Commissioners, we are honored to recognize this National Day of Service as a memorial to the legacy of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., who impressed upon this great country the importance of working together to make this country a better place to live. This day of service, through nonviolence, empowers individuals, strengthens communities, bridges barriers, and creates solutions to social problems that Dr. King envisioned. Let us then move forward to individually make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. Signed by Roger Crow, Randall Rogers, and Bryce Beeman, Hardin County Commissioners.
Lisa Mitchell will come forward and lead us in the singing of Lift Every Voice and Sing. Will be accompanied by Ms. Alma Wetzel from Payne Chapel. And we're asking everyone will please stand. The words will be on the screen.
Every And we'll take a moment here while we have a quick pause while we pull up the video. One vote, one voice. Martin Luther King urges you to vote.
Each of you assembled here today decided that you were going to see that 10 other people are registered before the last day, which I think is next weekend, the 14th, I believe. Just see what a power you can be. Then after getting people registered, that is another even greater responsibility. And that is to go out to vote. Now, I'm not going to be long. I'm going to be very brief. I'm not here to make a speech. I'm here to make a plea. And I'm here to urge you to do something that I think you will do and something that I think you want to do. Each of us has a moral responsibility, if we are the voting age and if we are registered, to participate in that decision. I come here to urge every person under the sound of my voice to go to the polls on the 3rd of November and vote your convictions. Now, I know you're intelligent people, and I don't need to tell you who you should vote for. I don't have any fear about that. You know who to vote for. I'm just asking you to vote. And so all men of goodwill will go to the polls on November the 3rd. And I hope we will have a great day in our nation so that when we wake up on the 4th of November, we will know that America has made the right decision.
Let's suppose that you're
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Mary Drzezinski-Finn. I'm a founding member of AHEAD, Allen and Hardin for Election, Action, and Democracy. AHEAD was started a little over a year ago, and it's a growing group of Allen and Hardin County residents committed to nonviolent action for democracy. Our monthly meetings rotate between Ada, Bluffton, and Lima. Our next meeting will take place tomorrow evening from 6 to 8 p.m. on Tuesday, January 16th at somewhere in Lima. If you'd like to learn more about our organization, please visit our table after the program. Just a little enticement. We do usually have a potluck, and the food is usually quite excellent beforehand. So, and you don't have to bring anything, so you're welcome to, but not required. I'm also a member of Ohio Northern University, just down the road here in Ada, and I wanted to mention that this Thursday, January 18th at 11 a.m. in the chapel, Ohio Northern University will be having a service to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He spoke at Ohio Northern University 50 years ago. It was one of his last speaking engagements at a university before his untimely assassination. The program will feature faculty, alumni, and staff who were there when Dr. King spoke, and they'll share their experiences. There will be selections from the ONU Gospel Ensemble, prayers led by students, and a time of reflection on Dr. King's legacy. So that we hope that you're able to join us this Thursday. Also, in April, there will be a special dedication on campus in Dr. King's honor, and more details on that will be to follow. So there are some handouts at the ahead table there as well. Yes, John?
The chapel's been moved to Freed Center to accommodate the crowd.
Thank you. Good to know, and it's great to know that we're expecting a good crowd. So we will definitely have room for all of you. Okay, today I am honored to introduce our panelists for today's program. They're here to celebrate the enduring legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and continue his work in empowering the people and ensuring that every person's voice, every person's vote matters. Our first panelist, and I'm going to introduce all of them before they speak. Our first panelist is Deborah Greenlee Gorman. And I'm sort of standing right in front of her. I apologize. Deborah is a member of the League of Women Voters of Perrysburg area in Wood County, next to Toledo and Lucas County. As a member of the League of Women Voters, she's part of their Observer program, attending local city council meetings and reporting on the business of the city likely to affect or be of interest to local residents. She's also extremely involved in the Fair Districts Equal Fair Elections campaign to end gerrymandering in Ohio, and that is what she'll be speaking about today. Our second speaker is Michael Hubble. Mike is the current chair of the Hardin County Democratic Party. Currently retired, Mike worked 38 years in public education. He taught science at Upper Scioto Valley High School and Kenton Senior High School. He served as principal and superintendent at Ada Exempted Village Schools before working 8 years as an education consultant for the Ohio Department of Education. Mike and his wife Joyce, also a retired educator, are residents of Pleasant Township, Kenton, Ohio, where they live with their dog Trixie, their gardens, and over 30 honeybee hives. Third, we will hear from Rob Radway, a native Buckeye. For over 20 years, Rob farmed at the family farm, taught school, and ran his own farrow to finish purebred hog operations. After serving as a classroom teacher for 22 years, Rob designed Ohio's first federally recognized local school-to-work program at the Ohio High Point Career Center, work for which he received one of Ohio's best BEST awards. Named Executive Director for Ohio School to Work by Governor George Voinovich, Rob worked closely with several state agencies and major corporations across the country. Rob serves as senior consultant for Honda of America's Education Outreach Program and provides consulting services to several universities and corporations, the State of Ohio Board of Education, the Ohio Department of Education, and the Ohio State Regional Alliance Advisory Board. Rob is chair of the Hardin County Republican Party and serves on the Republican State Central Committee. He currently chairs the Hardin County Board of Elections and is a former president of the Hardin County Educational Service Center Governing Board. He also serves on the Ohio Workforce Investment Board, is a member of Hardin Memorial Hospital Board of Trustees and the OSU Extension Advisory Board, and served as president of both the Hardin County Economic Development Council and Business and Education Together Council. He was appointed by the Governor of Ohio in 2007 as a member of the Ohio Commodores. Rob and his wife Rita have served the youth of the community for the past 33 years as 4-H advisors and now enjoy having their own grandchildren in their 4-H club. Our next panelist is the Reverend Dr. Randall Forrester. Reverend Forrester has served as senior pastor for St. John's Evangelical Church, where we are right now.
Amen.
For nearly 3 years. Ordained over 20 years ago, he served 4 other churches in Pennsylvania and New York prior to coming to Kenton. In addition to being a pastor, Reverend Forrester taught at a Christian high school and coached soccer for public and Christian schools. Currently, he officiates soccer matches. Reverend Forrester was elected constable in 2 different Pennsylvania townships and was discussed as a candidate for County Commissioner of Armstrong County, Pennsylvania. Reverend Forrester hopes to see St. John's work more in the community in 2018 as they focus efforts on evangelism and missions to the local people. Finally, we will hear from Rick Kane. Rick is is a member of our sponsor for today's event, Payne Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church here in Kenton. Rick was born on Detroit Street here in Kenton in the old McKittrick, is that correct? McKittrick Hospital in 1950. He's a Hardin County native, grew up in Patterston and Forest. He's the oldest son of Melvin and Margaret Richardson Kane, both Hardin County residents, born and raised. He's a 1968 graduate of Riverdale High School and attended Findlay College from 1968 through 1972, where he studied social studies and political science. He is retired from Cooper Tire and Rubber Company in 2012 after 38 years of work with the company. He's a member of Hardin County Genealogy Society and Sons of the Union Veterans of the Civil War. Rick is a father of 3 children, Aisha, Michael, and Hannah, and attends, as I said, Payne Chapel here in Kenton. Please give a welcome to all of our panelists.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming today. Appreciate that. So, Fair Districts Equals Fair Elections is a nonpartisan coalition made up of a host of good government groups led by the League of Women Voters of Ohio, Common Cause Ohio, with the goal of ending gerrymandering in the state of Ohio. So just so that we're all on the same page, I know there's been lots of talk about gerrymandering, but gerrymandering is the process of drawing voting districts to favor or disfavor a political party. And make no mistake about it, both political parties, whenever they have control of the State House, do this. This is our current map of our U.S. congressional districts. Our state representatives drew this map. You can see it's got some kind of funny looking lines on it. But they determined which party was going to represent the districts that you see on the map. So even before, even before any of us cast a ballot, even before we knew who the candidates were, it was already predetermined that which party would most likely represent that particular district. The result is safe seats for them, predictable results for us. So you might be sitting there thinking, okay, didn't we already pass anti-gerrymandering once before? I'm pretty sure I voted for that. And you would be partially right. In November of 2015, 71% of Ohio voters passed Issue 1, which created the bipartisan Ohio Redistricting Commission to end gerrymandering for the state legislative districts. okay? So we are now trying to extend that reform to the U.S. congressional districts. And the key number, or the key thing in this slide is that 71% of the voters. So that tells you this is nonpartisan. Voters on each side are interested in passing this reform. So what is in the proposal that Fair Districts is wanting to put on the ballot? So the highlights of the proposal is that it uses that bipartisan redistricting commission to draw the new map. And that commission consists of the governor, state auditor, secretary of state, and 4 members appointed by the state legislature. 1 member from the majority party, 1 member from the minority party in both the House and in the Senate. The commission must have the votes of 2 members of the minority party in order to approve the map. It keeps communities whole by minimizing the splitting of counties, municipalities, and townships, and no county can be split more than once. Each district will be nearly equal in population and requires districts to be contiguous and compact. It must follow the Voting Rights Act and other laws protecting minority voting rights. Fair Districts is working to put this proposal, which will amend the Ohio Constitution, onto the November 2018 general election ballot. So where are we today? You know, you saw me, a lot of you already signed my petitions this morning, which was great. So where are we in the petition gathering, and how can you help? Well, first of all, we need over 305,000 valid signatures in order to qualify for the ballot, and we need those by July 1st. In order to get 305,000 valid signatures, we need to collect about between 500,000 and 600,000 signatures, because a lot of those are not going to be valid and they're going to be thrown out. So we have a big task ahead of us. However, the good news is that as of December 20th, we have already collected 188,000 valid signatures, about 61% of what we need. In addition, so there's a couple, there's more than one requirement. So there's that big overall that throughout the state we need that 305,000 signatures. We also have a requirement though that says we need to turn in 5% of the last gubernatorial vote in at least in 44 out of our 88 counties. And again, as of December 20th, we have 27 counties out of those 44 that have met that goal, including Hardin County. So yay, Hardin County. But Hardin County and everyone else, don't let down, because we still need your vote. Because even though you might have met your 5% goal, every signature that we continue to collect goes towards that big goal of 305,000. So we need to keep getting signatures. So how you can help is today, if you've not signed a petition, please stop over at the table there and we can take your signature. You do need to be a registered voter, and it doesn't matter what county you come from. I've got blanks so we can get all of those. And if you're interested in gathering signatures, see me or see
Mary.
Mary. Mary. She can help with that as well. There's a lot of information on gerrymandering now, but you can go to this website, the fairdistrictsohio.org. Lots of information there, and that is fairdistrictsohio.org, including a map that you can click on to see how we are doing in terms of each of our counties that we have out there. Thank you so much today, and thank you for stopping at my booth.
Mike?
Morning.
just a little bit for me. As the introduction was, I'm the chair of the Hardin County Democratic Party, and I'm here really kind of representing Hardin County Democrats, but also the Board of Election a little bit. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about voter registration and some things with that. And I thought it was fitting to use Dr. King's words to kind of start this off. In 1957, he gave a speech called "Give Us the Ballot." And this was a section of that. So long as I do not firmly and irrevocably possess the right to vote, I do not possess myself. I cannot make up my mind. It is made up for me. I cannot live as a democratic citizen, observing the laws I have helped to enact. I can only submit to the edict of others. And I think, you know, that rings true today, all right? And we look at Hardin County as a good example, and on an average year we might have, you know, 40% turnout of the registered voters, which is about half of the people who could vote. And so when we have an election with 40% of the people, it takes 21 of those to win, but there's still half the electorate, or half the potential electorate out there. So we're passing legislation, electing people with, you know, 10, 12, 13% of our people who could vote, and we need to change that. We need to get people registered to vote. April the 9th this year is the deadline to vote in the May 8th primary. So I encourage people to get registered. If you know someone who's not registered, I would like you to talk to them about doing that. We have registration information over there, registration forms that can be filled out, and Sandy at the Board of Elections and Stephanie, I picked up those a week ago, and everything that you have to fill out is highlighted in pink. Everything in pink must be filled out. Everything, right? Where's Stephanie at? Right? Okay? Because even though you put down your birthday and you're 60 years old, if you don't check you're at least 18, it's rejected, and you have to redo it. Okay? So remember that if you wish to do that. Now, one of the things about voting, though, is, you know, according to the Constitution, a couple of places and 3 or 4 amendments, it talks about the right to vote shall not be denied or abridged. But yet, I had a meeting last week, and I talked about that, and I said that, you know, we supposedly have this right to vote, but we really don't have a right to vote. Because in order to vote, you must be registered. So you can't just walk into the polls and vote. You must be registered. And if you're registered, you don't have the right to vote unless you have the proper identification. Now, I'm very proud of what Ohio does in terms of that. Number one, it's very easy to register. We hope we can make it easier in the future. There might be automatic voter registration based upon driver's license, based upon age, graduating from high school. There are a lot of ways we can get people to register. But once you get registered, then you need to have the proper ID. And in some states, it's very limited. We may be familiar with what Texas procedures are. You need a state ID. Certain things aren't allowed. And there has been accusations of many, many thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people being disenfranchised by not having proper ID. In Ohio, yes, you can use a driver's license, a state-issued ID, but it is also military ID, a utility bill with your name and address on it that's current. That means within 12 months. It could be a paycheck from your employer within the last year. Okay? It can be a letter with a date, your name and address from a government agency, like a Social Security notification. So it is very, very easy to have proper identification in Ohio. And so Ohio laws, I think, lead the nation really in this idea of voter ID requirements. It's very, very, very easy in Ohio to vote, and I would encourage you to do that. when you vote. If you don't have your driver's license, put that last phone bill in your pocket, take it with you, something like that. Here's what the voter registration card looks like. Okay, it's a fold over. You can mail it in. You put a stamp on the back. You can take it up to the Board of Elections. You drop it off. Save yourself that 49-cent stamp now, is it? Okay, so you drop it off to the Board of Elections. Again, remember, registration is by the 9th of April this year for the May 8th primary election. All right. So that's kind of my presentation for today. I will tell you this, all sorts of information is available, and I'll demonstrate some of that when we're done today. HardinCountyElections.com. All right. There's also an app for your phone. I've got information over on that today. And if you go to HardinCountyElections.com, on the left side, you will see a section for voters. Click on for voters, and you can get all sorts of information. You can check to see if you're registered. You can check to see if your address is correct. You can check your voting history for the last 10 years to see if you voted in a primary. It will show you whether you voted as a D or an R or an independent if it was issues only. And so your voter history is there. You can update your address online. You can find a map showing your precinct, directions on how to get to the voting location within that precinct. It's a very, very easy website to navigate, and I would encourage you to take a look at it. And if you want today and you're not sure about some things, stop over. We'll pull your information up, and we'll check on it. And you can also then look to see, gee, I wonder if Joe down the street's registered to vote. Put in his name and address and look him up. All right? And if he's not registered to vote, go down, get Joe, his wife, his kids, everybody registered to vote, because it's a democracy, okay? We have a republic form of government. We elect representatives. Everybody should be participating in that. So I encourage you to register if you're not. Register your friends, get them to the polls. Do what you can, okay? It's very, very important. Thank you very much.
Rob.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm here going to wear two hats today, if that's all right. I am the chair of the Hardin County Republican Party and a member of the State Central Committee, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm also chair of the Board of Elections here in Hardin County, and Mike is one of our rovers, works for us in the polls, and we appreciate his service and all the people who work for the board, and I want to talk about that also. Those who don't know me, I'm a storyteller. So let me tell you a little story. I was in 5th grade, and I went to visit my cousins who lived in Decatur, Alabama. And we were swimming at the pool. And I noticed all across the chain link fence around the pool were all of these black children. And I said to my cousins, well, it's hot, why don't you swim? Oh, no. They don't swim in the pool during the week. They can come and swim on weekends. What? Well, then they proceeded to tell me that their schools, the blacks went to their own school, which they showed me in a tour of the city, and they went to their own school. I came home, I was a 5th grader, and I said to my parents, I don't get this, I don't understand. Because I go to school with black children. Terry and I went kindergarten all the way through high school together. We lived up on Culver Street, and our neighbors were blacks. I didn't get it. So then my parents began to explain to me a little bit about Republicans and Democrats. That was my first introduction to party politics. And they explained that we were the party of Lincoln. We were the party of President Eisenhower, who was desegregating the South by force, giving people the right to vote, giving people the right to go to the schools they wanted to go to and live where they wanted to. And I said, so how about the South? Well, they're controlled by Democrats at that time. That was my first introduction to politics. And people say to me, why are you a Republican? I became a Republican when I was in 5th grade. Because I didn't believe in that. Simple as that. Well, Deborah, welcome to Hardin County. We're glad you're here. I'm going to set Deborah just a little bit straight, something you shouldn't talk about. Gerrymandering in Ohio has happened forever. If you looked at the map, it's ridiculous. Some of the districts are ridiculous, and both parties have done it constantly. But also you have to realize that many of those districts are not based upon who they vote for, but population centers. You have to have so many votes in a district. And so that's an important thing that you have to, when you design those maps. The redistricting of Ohio is a Republican initiative. Republicans put that on the ballot and said, this isn't right. Yes, we control the state of Ohio. And as the controlling party, we should do the right thing. And so that initiative was put on the ballot by the Republican Party and passed. Now, interesting enough, I remember when, if you looked at that map, I wish it was still up there, Deborah. You know, one of the rules in gerrymandering you have to have in that committee who does all those weird things to the map. You have to have minority, when I say minority, the minority party votes in doing that.
There you go.
Have to. Oh, thank you so much. If you look at number 11, see District 11?
Cuyahoga County.
That was drawn by the Democrats because they wanted to ensure that seat. Huh. Okay. If you look at number 3, that was drawn because the Democrats wanted to control that seat. And Republicans said, well, okay, if you want those seats, fine. Now, you'll look at Northwest Ohio. 5. It's probably the most unified in the whole state as far as area. Why is that? Well, in Northwest Ohio, we are all neighbors. And we all work together. That's why. Now, should this be changed? Absolutely. And the committee is in the process of doing that. Although you can't do it automatically, you have to wait for elections to do that. And that's what they're waiting on, because that's the Ohio Revised Code. Thank you for putting that map up, Richard, very much. Let me talk then about voters in Hardin County. We have, anyone want to make a guess how many registered voters we have in Hardin County? Anyone want to guess? Our population's about 32,000. That's men and women and children. Anyone want to guess how many registered voters we have? We have 18,207. Now that changes constantly because we're always getting new ones in, right? Stephanie, that's called job security for Stephanie. Yeah. I do want to recognize Stephanie. Stephanie is one of the clerk from the Board of Elections, and you talk about a standing staff, and Stephanie, stand up before we can give you a please. She is one of our terrific workers at the Board of Elections. When you go to register, does anyone know the first thing that's asked? 2 questions are asked for. Automatic. Anyone know?
Are you 18 years old?
Are you a United States citizen? First thing, if the answer is yes, keep going. If the answer is no, you have to stop. Simple as that. Second question, are you 18 years of age? If you are, or will be by that election. Yes, keep going. No, stop. Simple as that. Where do you register? Oh my goodness. In Hardin County, you register at the Board of Elections, you register at the fairgrounds, you register at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, you register at libraries, you can register online. That was passed by our Secretary of State a year ago, that we, in our legislature, that people in Ohio should be able to register online. Pretty cool. I think it is. Now, one of the issues I think is really important to talk about is the issue that's called voter suppression. Mike alluded to it with our IDs. And every voter can come in Ohio and vote. I don't care if you don't have your ID, you can go ahead and vote as a provisional. We allow you to vote. Take this paper ballot, you fill it out, you put it in provisional stack, and people like me at the Board of Elections, we sit down after every election and we go through every provisional ballot, one ballot at a time. And our job is real simple, to make sure that provisional ballot counts. Stephanie, we had about 40 some, probably the last election, between 20 and 40 provisional ballots. And I believe, if you help me out, we rejected less than 4. Because we go through them one ballot at a time. We will do anything to count that ballot. We even go to extreme in Hardin County and other boards of elections in Ohio. If there's an error in the ballot they gave you, and we can agree what you're really wanting to vote, you know what we do in Ohio? We redo your ballot for you, so that you don't lose that vote. Now, Rob's not always happy doing that, because it takes a lot of late hours to do that, but we do that for one reason. Our job is to make sure every vote counts. Simple as that. We can assure you every vote in this county counts. Now, voter suppression. Do we need an ID? Yes. Driver's license? Super. Military ID? Super. Bill for a gas bill, electric bill. Story. Where's my high northern people? Presidential election. I'm standing in the polls in Ada. Mike's working the polls in Ada. And this young man standing in line, he walks up to sign in, and he pulls out his passport as his form of ID. Well, I knew right away that's not going to work. Why not? Anyone want to guess? No address. There's no address on a passport. And the poll worker said, I'm sorry, we can't take that as a form. Oh, he just went ballistic. He started screaming. He said, you know, you're discriminating against me because I'm a student, and on and on and on. And so I walked up and I said, did you know that? Yeah, I knew they couldn't accept that. He then pulled out his driver's license and give me a break. Did he make his point? Okay, he made his point. He made it of himself, and we all do that. Okay? It's easy to vote. We want to count every vote in Ohio. Now, how many of you, when you go in, don't want to declare your party? In Ohio, you don't have to. You don't have to declare when you register to vote in Ohio. You register to vote as a citizen. You're not a Republican, you're not a Democrat, you're not independent. But in the primary, you have 3 choices. You can register as a Republican, you can register as a Democrat, or you can register as independent. Now, here's an interesting story. Person walks up to vote in the last primary, and I'm standing there, and they want an independent ballot. I'm not going to tell people what party I am. No problem. Here's your ballot. Well, where's so-and-so's name on here? Well, they're a Democrat. Well, I want to vote for them. Well, you can't vote for them unless you declare your party. I call that voter intelligence, voter responsibility. People need to know what their job as voters are. Now, Dan, I'm no teacher, so I have 3 R's. They don't stand for Radway or Robinson, but they stand for, number 1, you have to register. If you don't register, I don't want to hear about it. When I was in 5th grade, my parents told me, if you don't vote, you have no right to complain.
That's right.
If you don't vote, that's tough cookies. Then your right to vote. Everyone has the right to vote in this state. If you're 18, you're an American citizen, and you're registered and live within this area. Story. Ohio Northern. Student insists he wants to vote in Hardin County. He's not registered here. I insist. It's my right. Doggone right it is. You can vote provisional, and we'll look it up. And are you registered back home? Oh, I think so, but I want to vote here. So then I said to him, now, young man, let me explain to you very easily. You do know that if you vote in Hardin County, you're going to change your official residence to Hardin County. Yes, that's right. Do you have student loans? Yeah. That student loan's tied to your home address. You're going to not be eligible for that student loan. Oh, I don't want to vote. I'll vote back home. Okay. Voter responsibility. They should know those things. Responsibility. How far does the average voter in Hardin County drive to their poll? Anyone want to guess? A maximum of 3 miles. Now, I don't have a right. Okay. You can vote absentee. How do I do that? You can come to the courthouse and do early voting. How many days before the election, Stephanie? 30 days before the polls open. They're open all day and some evenings and some weekends. Well, I don't have a card. You can do it by mail. Oh, well, okay. Well, I don't like doing that, and I'm not gonna, and I forgot to vote. It comes election day, and you haven't voted. You don't have a ride to the polls, so they're gonna lose their vote, right? Not in Hardin County. You know what we do in Hardin County? The Board of Elections will go to their home. We will carry a ballot to their home and watch them vote and take their ballot back for them. We go to the hospital. I have voted people in ICU who wanted to vote that day. We voted one a couple years ago, a young man in his 30s who insisted on voting, and sometimes you get a patient who's not real, they're medicated, they're ill. This young man was with it. He knew every person on the ballot, he knew every issue, he knew how to vote, ding, 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 ding. He died the next day. But you know what? His vote counted. Now those are facts. Those are the things we do in Hardin County. We vote nursing homes. There is every opportunity. People give us a hard time, don't they, Mike, in Ohio, about our voting. Oh, you can't, oh, you're terrible vote. You're suppressing the vote in Hardin County, etc. You know where most of that coming from? It's coming from the state of New York, who complain about Ohio voting. Do you know how many days they vote in New York? Anyone want to guess? There's no early voting in New York. They vote one day. And they complain about Ohio's voter suppression? I don't think so. We in Ohio, both parties, have done everything possible to make it easy to vote in Ohio. Now, let me give you some other things. How many of you want to run for office? Oh, come on, here we go. Tim's running for office, Cheryl's running for office, John's running for office. Sir, tell me who you are.
My name's Shane Hartmeyer, young man.
How are you, sir?
I'm blessed, thank you, and you?
I'm glad. I'm glad you're running for office. It takes a special responsibility to do that. You have to step forward and say, hello, I'm willing to do that. You need to support those people. It takes a special person to run for political office and serve. Look at the world today. To put yourself forward with all the garbage they're going to talk about with you, it takes a special person. We have a commissioner seat coming up in Hardin County. You're only going to vote for 2 people plus issues this time in the primary. You're going to vote for county commissioner, you're going to vote for county auditor, and you're going to vote for a few issues. Not very many. So, Mike, our 40% turnout is now going to be down to 20%, 21, 22%. Voter responsibility. I got it. It's your responsibility and mine to come vote. And if you don't come vote, we don't want to hear it. Thank you, everybody. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate it.
Reverend Forrester.
Awesome, please. All right, so good to be here with you. About 10 days ago, we finished celebrating Christmas, and it's not because we're Orthodox or anything. Christmas is 12 days. It ends on January 5th. One of my favorite Christmas songs is The Rebel Jesus, and it's probably not one that you've heard before. Bing Crosby never recorded it or anything. But in that song, it kind of has some political overtones to it. It's not meant to be political, but sometimes the things we believe means that we have to get political. And that's part of Martin Luther King's legacy to us, is that being biblical and being followers of Christ and being followers of God mean that sometimes our actions step on the toes of others. And in that song, The Rebel Jesus, it talks about how at Christmas time, we give gifts to our relations. And then it says if we're feeling generous, we'll give to the poor. But then in that song it talks about if we begin to question why the poor are poor, we might just get what the rebel Jesus got. And that's what happened with Martin Luther King. He dared to not only say, I believe, but he said, because I believe, I must live differently. And if I live differently in a world which demands conformity, I risk my life. And that's part of what we're called to. And my part today is to talk about how the church is to carry on the legacy of Martin Luther King. And I think we have carried on his legacy in so many ways, but I don't know if you'd seen the quote that was up there earlier prior to the event officially starting, but one of his criticisms was to the moderate white church, because so often people would rather conform and have peace than dare live out what we espouse and risk disruption and anarchy and possibly the loss of our own prestige and power and perhaps even our lives. Martin Luther King, in letters from the Birmingham jail, a letter I believe was written April 16, 1963, he wrote, "There was a time when the church was very powerful. It was during that period that the early Christians rejoiced when they were deemed worthy to suffer for what they believed." Imagine that. Believe it or not, that doesn't preach too well in the church today. Come, pick up your cross and follow me, Jesus said. And Martin Luther King said, in the early church, people actually rejoiced. They didn't go out looking for suffering. They weren't masochists. But they believed that when they suffered for their faith, God deemed them worthy to be like Christ and to be different. And so they didn't, again, they didn't say, let me just suffer for the sake of suffering. But they fell down on their knees before God Almighty and said, thank you for thinking that I'm a little bit like your son, that I could walk in his way. And that quote goes on and says, in those days the church was not merely a thermometer that recorded the ideas and principles of popular opinion. It was the thermostat that transformed the mores of society. It changed how people thought, how they believed. Believe it or not, if it wasn't for the church, we might not have hospitals today. We might not have a hotel industry. We might not have orphanages, because back in the early days, when you traveled, you hoped you had friends or a stranger would take you in. And pretty soon monasteries and convents cropped up, and they said, we don't care who you are or where you're from. If you are a stranger and you need a place to rest your head, you need a meal in your belly, come, we'll feed you. Back in that day, if you had too many children, it was okay to set a child outside. We debate abortion now. Back then, infanticide was okay. We can't afford the new baby that came to the house. And I think it was up to about a year or so, you could set a baby outside, like on a day like this, and walk away, and your conscience was clean in that culture. And Christians said, we believe in life, and every life is sacred. Give us those children. Give us your elderly when you can't take care of them. Give us those who are the outcasts, and we'll serve them. And in those early days of the church, people would look at Christians and go, they're kind of nuts. They only got one God. Everybody knows there's 1,000 gods. Why would you only pray to one? They run off and they eat flesh and they drink blood. What kind of crazy cannibals and vampires are these? And those were the actual quotes that people had. But then they would turn to their neighbors and say, you know, these Christians are kind of foolish, but they're nice to have around. They make our culture a little better. They clean up our streets. They do good things for people that we can't afford to, or government can, or whoever can. Why isn't the church spoken of in those terms today? Why aren't we transforming the conversation in our culture today? And I'll tell you why. Because politics stink. And I'm not pointing fingers at you guys. And just so you know, I am offended when I moved to Ohio, because you only got 3 categories: Republican, Democrat, and Independent. I'm none of the 3. I'm other. And I'm not going to discuss my political affiliation. But years ago, I got out of college, got out of seminary. I thought, hey, I'm young, I'm bright. I'm a stable, what's the term, stable genius, right? I went to the same undergraduate school as our president, so I thought, somebody out there is going to want me to run for office for them. So I went to a picnic for one of the major parties, and I introduced myself. I said, here I am, I'm 24 years old. Make me, mold me, buy me off if you want to. You know, I'm willing to I know sometimes politics means you got to trade some things. I'm willing to play the game. And he looked me up and down. You know, my granddaddy had been a businessman in that community. I thought, man, I got some natural connections in this community. He looked me up and down and he said, no, you're not our guy. So as my introduction said, I did win office twice in 2 different townships. I was elected constable. Lowest elected position in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. My great granddaddy had been a constable, and his uncle or somebody in his lineage had been a constable, so I thought, why not? Never made a nickel off of that. To get elected, to get on the ballot to be constable, you have to find 10 people in your party to sign a petition. First time I did that, it was painful. Knocking on doors. I lived out in the country, so it wasn't like I go down the streets and just say, are you my party? I had to travel to get to people's houses. And it was I got ridiculous stories to get 10 signatures, to get my name on the ballot, to be voted on by 4 people, and 2 of them were my parents and 1 was mine. That was my introduction to politics. And then I moved off to New York for a few years, and I moved back into Pennsylvania, and I went down to vote. And I was going to the hospital, like this morning, I had to go down to the hospital in Columbus, and I lived about the same distance from Pittsburgh. And I ran down, told my wife, I said, I'm going to go vote early, and then I'm running to Pittsburgh, go visit, Mrs. So-and-so, and I go in to vote, and nobody's on the ballot for constable in the township where I resided, so I wrote my name in. And I called my wife and said, hey, write my name in for constable. I won the election. There were 11 votes cast in Sugar Creek Township, Armstrong County, Pennsylvania that year. 9 fools voted for themselves and forgot to tell a friend or spouse to vote for me. I was smart enough to call my wife. And really the duty of a constable was to hang out at the polling place and make sure nobody creates disruption for riots. And so every time an election came up, I would deputize someone. Because I'm going, it ain't worth it. It's for me to stand there for 12 hours and make $50, right? And I could find somebody that would love to be deputized. And it's just a crazy thing, right? But politics are hard. It's difficult because that's the lowest elected position in Pennsylvania. I can't imagine, when it mentioned I was considered as a candidate for county commissioner, that was the other comment I wanted to make because, churches sometimes eat their own. And that's not a good thing, right? We beat up on people that are different from us. Right? Churches tend to conform. And when we talk about the legacy of Martin Luther King, he made I think it was he that made the observation, but maybe someone else. But one of the most segregated times in America is Sunday morning, because I have friends that have taught or preached in big cities, and you got the Korean church, you got the when I was in Buffalo, we had the Russian church north of us, got the African Methodist Episcopal church. I mean, you put that in your name, right? If you're not African or Methodist or Episcopalian, and I'm not any of those, am I welcome there? No, I know I am welcome. But that's what we do, and we go with like-minded people. And so 7 years ago, one of those third parties was speaking with me, and I was speaking with some of those folks, and really it was a lark. We were going out for breakfast every Saturday morning, and we would talk political ideas and philosophy and how we wanted to just kind of challenge the status quo and search for something new. And my name kind of got pushed as, why don't you run for county commissioner? And so I called the local newspaper. It was called the Leader Times, not the Kenton Times, but it was similar. And this guy said, hey, that sounds like an interest piece we'd like to do. Could I come talk to you? I said, sure, And I'm thinking I'm going to get 2 paragraphs. I'm going to get an itty-bitty picture. It was a slow news day. There was nothing major going on in Hawaii. The president didn't say anything outlandish at that time. There were no tax bills being debated. And so I got on the front page of a county-wide newspaper with a big hulking picture of myself, and my congregation went nuts. And I didn't know, hey, thank you, Pastor, for putting us out there. Because I had staunch Democrats, I had staunch Republicans, and I was none of the above. I can make fun of any candidate, right? And I'm not. And I mean it sincerely. And they did not like that their pastor might be a candidate. And I'm going, county commissioner, why are we arguing about that? I'm not passing legislation. I'm trying to do this to serve our community. I'm trying to do it to supplement my income, I'll admit that, but back there was a part-time position. I'm planning on being full-time as your pastor. I think I can represent you and your ideals. We keep saying in the church, Oh, isn't it a shame what's going on in the culture today? Isn't it a shame that we can't do the things that we used to be able to do? Isn't it a shame people protest if the Ten Commandments are put out somewhere, or you wear a cross on your lapel, or what have you? We complain about that, and then when somebody wants to stand up and say, this is who I am, vote for me, don't vote for me, but if you vote me in, this is what I'm going to represent, this is what I'm going to do, this is the person I'm going to be. Why would you be the first ones to beat me up? But yet that's what happened. And I was embarrassed, and I was wounded, and I was hurt. And then we wonder why people don't want to get involved. And that's a shame. Because as Martin Luther King said, we need to be setting the tone. We need to be the thermostat and not the thermometer.
That's right.
We need to be showing people the way. And in today's day and age, we need the church now more than ever. You can't defend some of the things our president has said. You cannot, likewise, defend what some of his detractors have said. They're equally guilty. And we got to get out of the mindset of being the party or being the church that represents whatever party. And again, my last church, I had people in my congregation who would say, if you're going to be a good Christian, you got to be a Democrat. And I'd have other people who would likewise say, to be a good Christian, you got to be a Republican. And I'd be sitting there going, so you're both telling me I'm not a good Christian. And they'd just stop and stare. And depending on their mood, they might say yes, they might say no. Yeah, that's the church. It is. But today, we need Christians to be Christian. Martin Luther King wasn't trying to be the man that was the face of the black population or the African American population in the United States of America. He was a minister of the gospel first and foremost. And I love whoever put up the fact up there. I don't know how many of you know that. Martin Luther wasn't his given name. He and his father had the name Michael King. They went off to Germany, studied about good old Martin Luther, whose movement we celebrated this past year, 500 years of the Reformation. And we're so moved that this guy went back to the Bible, recovered some long-lost ideas that had been forgotten about, that Augustine had uncovered centuries before. And he said, maybe we should be more biblical. And Martin Luther King's father said, we're going to change our names when we get back to the States. We are now going to be Martin Luther King Sr. and Martin Luther King Jr. And that impacted Martin Luther King. He was first and foremost a minister of the gospel, heard what the word said, and then said to himself, I must live differently. I can't live for peace. I can't live for comfort. I can't live for a congregation that says, don't step out of these lines. He said, I just have to be honest and true to what is taught. Right. And then what that teaching then implicates me to do. And we need that today in our culture. We need to just stand up when the rhetoric gets the rhetoric is just ugly. I don't know how else you describe it. We should weep when anybody wants to commit violence to somebody that doesn't agree with them. That is shameful. I think we should be able to sit down and break bread. And if you say something that I think is foolish, I should be able to say, you know what, I think that's foolish. But then you have the right to then turn to me and go, why do you think it's foolish? I think what you believe is foolish, but we should be able to speak to one another, disagree with one another, but then when we're done, go, hey, you know what, there's some wonderful sweet rolls that Nancy Wilcox baked for us. Let's go get a cup of coffee. And let's enjoy a sweet roll together as brothers and sisters. Amen. Even if we don't have the same faith, we are citizens of this land. And as citizens of this land, we need to defend the beliefs of other people, however ludicrous, ridiculous we might think they are. We don't have to agree if you should stand or kneel, raise a fist during the national anthem or not. You've got to understand that we're in this together. And the church has the opportunity to speak that into this culture. But instead we stand on the sidelines. Heaven forbid. If somebody thinks I'm not a good Democrat or a good Republican or a good independent or a good whatever I am, heaven forbid. Instead, we just need to say we love and we have faith. And because of that, we're willing to serve. And because of that, we're going to stick our necks out. We're going to make sure that more people are registered to vote. That the people that are registered to vote have access to that ballot box. That we're going to make sure that the districts are fair. We're going to make sure that justice is meted out in our local community, in our state, in our nation. And it can cost us whatever it costs, but we need to stand for justice. And I don't care if a Muslim or a Buddhist, an anarchist, somebody who wants to just criminalize Christianity gets into office if that's what the people want. I don't care. Because I have faith in something greater. It doesn't matter who sits on the throne of this world, because I know who sits on the throne of this universe. And that's what Martin Luther King understood. I don't need a book deal. I don't need popularity. I don't need large finances in my bank account. I just need to be true to the King of my heart. And so let that be our legacy. And let us turn away from the things that we have participated in and allowed to happen in the name of security, in the name of peace. Let us speak truth, and let us demand justice. Amen.
Good morning. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a family group called the Staples, and they sang a song called Respect Yourself. I got this call a couple of days ago that asked me to be on this panel this morning. I didn't know quite what's supposed to happen. I hope you bear with me just a second. I'm going to call you all neighbors, because that's what we are. We're neighbors.
That's right.
And we need to respect ourselves. I don't have an enemy in this room, or an adversary, unless you make me one. We all have a responsibility to vote. That's the subject for this morning. And that comes with respecting yourself. You shouldn't complain when things don't go your way if you don't stand up and speak your mind. If you don't raise your hand and say, I have a problem with that, and we need to do something about it. My family's been in this community, and that's my only claim to fame here. My family has been in this community for well over 100 years. Education is the key. We don't educate our children to the facts of American life, of American history, and that's why there is so much adversity and dysfunction in our society. People don't like these people. I don't like those people. But when you have to stand in line with your adversary on the other side, trying to kill you, I've had people tell me that they don't care who's standing beside them, whether they're Protestant or Catholic or Jewish or black or Indian or Mexican or whatever. Our president wanted to deny people who are transgender the right to be in our armed services. I say, if you can pass the mental exam, if you can pass the physical exam, and you want to put yourself on that wall between us and our enemies, and you want your rights when you come out of the service, you deserve them. I will not deny anybody their rights in this country. That being said, I think we all should take a moment to pause and think about how we view the issues facing us. My father told me growing up that he hated a thief and a liar. And we have a president who lies. He lies about the smallest of things. He will not let a thing pass. He has to come back with something worse. I have a real problem with that. But all I can do is vote. We had people who had Barack Obama for 8 years who hated Barack Obama. And a lot of people say, oh, we need to get him out. We need to get him out. Vote. We have a president that I do not like on various levels. I'm going to encourage my friends and family to vote. I don't want to see any harm come to him in that office, because he represents people And if we don't like what we have, we need to vote. We need to respect ourselves in all manner. Thank you.
Okay, just a second here. And we're going to have time now for questions and answers. Our panelists will be happy to take your questions. Anyone has any? We've had a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different issues mentioned. Sir?
Yes, the two gentlemen from the election board, do you ever see a day when the United States will vote on Saturday instead of Tuesday?
You can vote on Saturday.
I mean, as general election.
It's a general election.
I think we're the only democratic country that votes on a Tuesday during the middle of the week.
Why is that? Who picked Tuesday?
That's a great question. Mike, do you know that?
No, I don't really.
I don't.
I mean, it's set in state laws,
It's
or
statute.
legislators
Yeah.
have said that.
And the federal,
National level, the federal level.
federal law would set on that Tuesday, the first full week in November. So why they pick that, I don't know. That's a great question.
Because it's after harvest.
It was for the farmers.
Yeah.
Could have been, yeah.
It was after the harvest, and it was the amount of time it took to, you wouldn't travel on a Sunday, which meant they couldn't have it on Monday because it would take full 2 days oftentimes for people to travel, so they moved it to the Tuesday.
Well, I mean, yeah.
That's a good question.
Well, yeah, the November general elections, that's not really the case, but we still have all of our other ones on a Tuesday, it's just set up that way, yeah.
Do you think it would make a difference if it was on a weekend?
I think it would make a huge difference.
Do you?
Well, and again, as both of us said, we are, I think, very lucky as compared to New York, that we have the opportunity to vote for many, many days and at different hours, so that if you're working different times, I don't have the schedule here for voting, when the polls are open and how many days. I've got it over there, but we have those opportunities to vote other than on just election day on Tuesday, and the polls are open for 13 hours. So
On election day.
Yeah, on election day.
One thing we've noticed that on election day, because so many people are taking advantage to vote early in Ohio, our polls are not busy on election day. We had, what was our, nearly 40% early voting last election, so that reduces the lines at the polling place. Terrific.
Well, my question would be kind of piggybacking off Mike's question. Ohio, yeah, we're doing pretty well, but let's say, for the, oh dear, thank you. For the whole United States, let's say you're a single mom, you have to get your kids to either, daycare, school, whatever, you have to go to work, you don't have time on a 15-minute lunch break, certainly to go do it. If you don't have transportation, that adds to it. By the time you get off work, get your kids, try and get them home, give them something to eat, get to the polls. You just, really, it's just sometimes just not enough time. So I wonder, do you see it ever being a possibility, and what would one do to make it a possibility?
Make it Saturday vote?
Yeah, to get it federal, to try and change it.
That would be legislation by Congress or by the Ohio House and Senate. That would have to be legislative.
Because like I said, I think Ohio, I do think we're doing pretty well good across the board.
Well, and and I agree with you on a Saturday. Again, you might have
you got other group of people who work on Saturdays, that's part of their normal schedule, and they have the same issues if they work on Saturday, but it certainly would be a lower number. But, you know, if we go back 20 years and you wanted to vote absentee, you had to have a reason why you were voting absentee. You know, you had to, you know, you were going to be out of town, you were going to be, you know, in the hospital for surgery, you know, so you had to have these reasons. Now you don't have to do that, so you can request that absentee ballot, and again, you can drop it off at your convenience at the Board of Elections, or you can mail it in. And so Ohio has really, I think, made it a lot easier for people to vote early and vote absentee as compared to what it was. You know, I can remember the first time I had to vote absentee. You know, you had to go up to the Board of Elections when they were still upstairs in the courthouse, and you had to sign the form as to why you were going to be voting in an absentee ballot. So it is much easier, and I would encourage anyone who has those kinds of issues to make sure that you explore, call the Board of Elections and explore how to do the early voting and absentee voting, so that you can kind of avoid those issues that you have, because it is a real burden for some people. It is a real true burden, and if you're in a place like New York, which has no early voting at all and no way to do that, it's extremely burdensome.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking. So it's on state by state level.
Yeah.
It would be a hard thing to.
In Hardin County, we have
across the board,
combined some voting areas, you know, and trying to condense them. And we've done that for trying to make things easier. But you know, voting in Hardin County has always been a social event. It has. Jerry, remember, where did we vote? We voted in my dad's garage. His shop, you know? And that's where the neighbors came and all voted. It was and it still is a social event in a lot of our county. That's where you see people in your township and your et cetera. And so I really think it's important that we try to keep that voting as community-based as possible, because that's where we live.
You can always bring snacks for the poll workers.
We'll invite you to happy hour. At church. Communion, yeah.
My question is, what are the criteria for purging voters in the state of Ohio?
That's an excellent question. Excellent. I think both of us can address that. There's been some news in the news recently. Our Board of Elections receives from our health department death certificates on a regular basis, about every month or so. Yes. Every month they send to us people who have died in Hardin County. So we can have those official. We don't read it. You know, the old days used to read newspaper, and they take the newspaper. Oh, so and so died. Let's take them off the roll. Well, now we wait for the official death certificate to come to do that. Voters are purged in our election in Ohio by law if they have not voted in 2 federal elections. But that's not always true, because how many of you renew your driver's license every 4 years? Everybody does. Guess what? When you renew your driver's license, what do they ask? Are you a registered voter? If not, you're simple click, 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 and now you're re-registered. And so it's an automatic renewal for another 2 terms, another 4 years, automatic. And so that you don't lose that process at all.
So, when, I forget what his title is, Husted purged 2 million voters, were those all deaths or non-deaths?
No.
And Rob had a good point about that for you know, the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. But you know, how many people in here do not have a driver's license? One. Okay. Do you have a state ID license?
Yes.
State ID. All right. You go to some communities and not everybody has a driver's license. If you live in urban areas, you may all the time take public transportation. You don't have a driver's license, and you may not have gone to get a state ID so that automatic renewal can happen. And so those are the cases where we have people who and if they haven't exercised their right to vote for whatever reason, okay, apathy, all right, not every registered voter voted last time, did they? Okay, so if you choose not to do that, you typically tend to vote probably if you're registered on presidential elections, or if there's a big hot topic locally, okay? Maybe a tax levy or a bond issue or something like that. But, and so it is fairly common for people to miss those 2 federal elections, all right? But you get a postcard, you get notified, and I know that sometimes we go beyond that in Hardin County to try to make sure that, hey, you know, is that person still here? We got a postcard back, you know, have they actually moved? Are they deceased? And I got notification that my father passed away from the Board of Elections, okay? That he wasn't, you know, on the voter rolls anymore. So, again, but some of that is because of the way Hardin County office works. Not every county in Ohio does that. For example, if you're running for office and you have to fill out petitions, okay, the amount of information you get about what goes on the petition and what, you know, what you have, how many signatures and all that. In some counties, they hand you a form and you have to do all of that on your own. They don't answer questions for you. And how do I know that? Because I talked to Board of Elections officials last week down at the state convention of Board of Election people. And so, you know, there's not a lot of uniformity on that from county to county. They do what's required by law in some areas, and in some areas, they do what's the right thing to do. What's the right thing to do.
Every candidate who comes to our office is given a packet of detailed information, exactly of how to do it, how to file, etc. And plus, we answer questions. So they say, well, what if? Well, then we have to, you know, hello. Now, we can't do it for you.
And there are some candidate booklets over there that I brought from the Board of Elections, and if anybody's interested in taking a look at what that is, you know, what the qualifications are for an office, what the terms are, number of signatures you need for petitions and all that sort of thing. The booklet is over there, and I've got 5 or 6 of them over there. You're welcome to take one of those or look at them.
Back to your question, I think the majority of those people who were purged were not from deaths, but the majority were change of address. They moved. So they no longer live in Hardin County, they live in Hancock, or they live in Columbus.
But then they can...
Then they can re-register, absolutely. All you have to do is re-register.
And there's also state-to-state communication. If someone has moved and, you know, get a notification from another state that somebody was formerly in Ohio with this address here is now there. And so those people may get purged when the 2 boards of elections for the 2 states communicate with each other. And so that's also a purge. Now, the one that has made the news here recently is the young man who was serving, I believe it was in Afghanistan in 2011, and he hadn't voted. Now, again, you can argue about whether he should have known about it and all of that, but he didn't re-register or send his postcard back, or whatever the reason was. He came back and he hadn't voted for those 4 years after the last time, and he wasn't allowed to vote. All right. So you know, we hear about those sorts of things in the news, but that's fairly rare.
It is.
Hi, Cheryl. Very quickly, good afternoon. I'm Cheryl Buckland from Hancock County, and I learned something from each of you today. And I've been in the political process for a very long time. And pastors, I must confess, I didn't go to church yesterday, but I'm very, very glad that I came here today.
Amen. Amen. You're welcome to Payne Chapel anytime.
I was raised a Lutheran, and that is my professed faith. It is by grace and grace alone that we are accepted into heaven. But your message, I think, particularly is one that we need to share with our young voters. Young people today don't want to be judged. They ask that we meet them where we are. We should very willingly and happily share our faith. But the notion of inviting people to gather around a table, have coffee and cinnamon rolls after, recognizing that we're all not going to agree with everything that the other person has to say. That was a real profound message from both of you today. So thank you, and God bless all of you for your time today. It's very informative.
Other questions? Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Micah Smith. I'm a lifelong resident of Kenton, Ohio and Hardin County. And I'd like to follow up and also thank the panel for all coming to speak. The Reverend spoke of the struggle that comes from living one's truth. And as someone of the Jewish faith, being raised in a Jewish home and in a culture that is a community that is predominantly of a different faith, I can attest to that struggle, especially at times when you feel like you're different and you feel like you're the one that stands out from the crowd. So as far as the struggle goes, that resonates. However, I also think that that is something that could resonate with voters in general, because you all speak, especially the two gentlemen on the Board of Elections, of the voter turnout for the elections and how for a general election it might be 40% or maybe 50% in a presidential election. And in a primary vote, it might be down towards 20% or 25%. And I think that that speaks to something that there are people that are registered to vote, but they're not voting. And you can answer that, that's fine. I guess the reason I bring up the struggle is because I feel like a lot of people are struggling with the idea of voting, and they feel like their vote doesn't matter, or their vote isn't going to change the politics as usual scene that they're seeing on a day-to-day basis. So I guess my question for the panel is, how can we take the individual struggles of our day-to-day lives and incorporate that so we're getting 50% or above in primary elections? So we're getting voter turnouts where people are voting and coming to vote because they want to, because they've embraced their struggle and they want to push further into the political scene or something of that nature. So if any of you could speak to that. The final speaker, you talked about telling people to vote. Perhaps you get some feedback from people when you tell them to vote and they say, oh, well, I don't vote because of this or that. Because for some people, I think maybe they don't feel like there's hope. That all they see and they feel from day to day is their struggle. So does anybody, or can anybody speak to the people that aren't voting? Other than get out to vote, what can we do to bring hope back and for people to embrace their struggle and actually participate in the democracy and be hopeful of a future going forward?
Agreeable to these two gentlemen, yes, the millennials are going to come and speak. And the people who are not happy with the way things are going are going to come out and speak. And they're not going to vote Republican because they're Republican. They're not going to vote Democrat because they think they're a Democrat. They're going to vote for the people who speak to their issues and their needs. And the tide is coming. And it's going to be, I hope, I wish we had more of that American family fabric, where people did the right thing because it was the right thing to do for the country, for each of us. Where we all were holding hands and we're saying, this is what holds this country together. This is the greatest country on earth. And when we stop, and until we stop tearing one another apart and our institutions down, it's going to take that rolling tide of things, and we need to be careful because we might not like what we get, because the millennials don't have ties one way or another. We need to instill in our children the values that we would like to see perpetuated in this society. And it's almost, I'm not going to say it's too late, because that's why I go to church. Because the Bible says if you will turn from your ways, I will guide you. and I will save him. And that's what we're going to have to turn from the way some of the things I was speaking about. I'm sorry, I don't want to dominate the conversation, but we're going to have some of that, or there's a day of reckoning that's coming.
Every vote counts, Micah. I mean, it's a cliche. Mr. Flowers, would you like to explain how every vote counts? What happened to you, young man?
Here, Errol.
Yeah, I was kind of waiting on that. Yes, every vote does count. As a township trustee, I lost the vote to a coin toss. So yes, your vote does count. Afterwards, I had many people say, "Oh, I just thought you was going to win. I didn't go vote." I had one gentleman say, "Well," and this takes a very honest man to do this, but it also gives me a little insight on elections. I always thought I didn't need a sign in the yard to be represented. I needed to go knock on doors. So I didn't get election signs. And the gentleman says, "I got mixed up when I was voting, and I voted for the wrong person. I would have won by 2. If I would have had a sign now that said, 'Run for office.'" So, you know, that was my fault, not his. It was my fault. So, yeah, and to address Micah's question a little bit, if you don't like who's running in November, it's because you didn't do your job at the primary. And the primary is where you choose who's going to run in November. And you can change every primary your denomination, whether you're a Republican or Democrat.
Yes. One of the hardest things I did was when I was first being chairman of the Board of Elections was to flip a coin for that race. And we had another coin flip this past election in Alger. Again, a tied vote. And Darrell knows how good the system works because we recounted. We knew there was a tied vote. There wasn't any question, was there? That's the way it turned out. And by state statute, you have to either flip a coin, do some kind of lottery. We flipped a coin, and that's what happens. Micah, every vote counts, but it goes back to voter responsibility. As Mr. Kane said, when they turn out the vote, that's what you get. You know. And this last election, was that shouldn't happen. Well, okay, that's the election. And in this country, when you don't like it, as Gerald says, then you get out the vote and change. Simple as that.
And I would just add to that, from the fair districts perspective, is that when our districts and our voting becomes more competitive, where the elected officials need to really listen, and they need to listen to everyone. They're not allowed to just only listen to their own constituents. They have to listen to everyone. That will also help in that process. It's one piece of the puzzle, if you would.
You know, and again, when you hear that every vote counts, and we have Darrell's election and the coin flips, and we had one in Virginia for a congressional district for the Virginia State House, okay, they tend to be more local. They tend to be things like maybe even a bond issue or a school levy that can be very, very close, and where individual votes, 1 or 2 votes, can make a big difference. When we go looking at things like the map that was up there, it's going to be pretty hard to gerrymander the 4th district or the 5th district to make it, we'll say, purple, not blue, but even purple, because of the communities that are there. All right, but when you look at what they call the stake on the lake, that's an example of gerrymandering. It's true that Columbus, Franklin County, and Columbus is a Democratic district down there, but it's a little bit revisionist to talk about the Democrats demanded that to happen. Well, they didn't have the votes to make it happen. It was allowed to happen that way because it still guarantees the State House, by having those population centers, which are contiguous municipalities, cities, not chopped up in little pieces, up in Cleveland and Franklin County and down in Cincinnati and Youngstown, those places. They are these little pockets. You see these little tiny districts. They're high population centers, okay? And one of the ideas is that if you're part of, say, Columbus City, why should the people in Columbus be divided up into 5 different congressional districts, okay? They're compact there. But the idea is, if you look at the state legislature, it's 2/3 Republican, and it has been as long as we've had the districts we've had. The U.S. Congress is that way because of the way the districts we have. If we didn't have those, there are 3 or 4 of those districts. One goes across the top, all across Lake Erie, connected by a bridge. We have one that goes from almost 2/3 the length of Ohio down in the south and west, or south and east. We got one up through the center of Ohio, and that's the result of gerrymandering. And why I say that in relation to the question is, when you go to vote for Congress, you go to vote for the state legislature, and you know that everything is stacked against you for getting a candidate you're interested in, whether it's in Franklin County or whether it's in Northwest Ohio, all right? There is a tendency for that to curb voting for those people who tend to feel they're been disenfranchised. My vote won't count for U.S. Congress. My vote really doesn't count for a state Senate or the State House and the General Assembly, okay? And I think that has been what has happened over the years, all right? We used to have Democratic governors. We used to have Democratic people in office in Hardin County at the county level. And voter turnout, I think, would be better if we had these bipartisan commissions set up to end gerrymandering, all right? I can't complain about the new system that is being set up and implemented for the state legislature, all right? Voters overwhelmingly pass that in every county in Ohio. We hope to do the same thing for the U.S. Congress, congressional districts, okay? Bipartisan commission does that. As a Democrat or as a Republican, I don't think I have any reason to complain about those districts. Right now, we do. And I think it's a legitimate argument to make.
Thank you, Mike.
Just real quick, let's talk about local. A few years ago, when they were redistricting for the State House in Ohio, the map showed Hardin County split down by the Saddle River. So the city of Kenton would actually be in 2 House seats. Well, I mean, all of us said, no, wait, I don't care how you're going to do it. You can't split. You can't, number one, split it. The counties are split, I understand, but to split a city because of a river, no. And so, that was stopped. So it happens. You have to just watch against it.
And that also splits then the people on one side of town are voting for a bond issue for Kenton and somebody else for Congress, and on the south side they're voting for the same bond issue or the same tax levy, but they're voting for somebody else for Congress. And those 2 people might have totally different views about school taxes and everything else. So, yeah,
ridiculous.
It needs to be fair.
Just a thought, not a question. Very wise man named Roger Brown once said that he thought the computer and the internet was one of the worst things to ever happen. And I do believe, well, they have their plus side. I do believe that they may be the demise of us, because once Facebook and all that came about, that's where people are getting their news. It's where so much hate is spread between one another. I mean, not just here, but all over the world, hate is being spread. I'm just finding this out. I've only been on there about 6 weeks, and I'm soon to be off because it's too much for me. But I think that we have to, I'm not trying to be preachy about it, but I'm just learning myself what's happening. Sounds cliche, but our children really are our future. And if you don't realize, your kids really are listening. Tiny little children are hearing all the hate talk back and forth between each other. And I think that we have to find a way to speak to each other with respect, like Rick said, because if we can't teach them how to do it, they're going to grow up, because children live what they learn. And we have to do better. We have to. That's all I have to say on that. But I think it's really important.
One of the things I had written down that I wanted to add to that, and I'll do it now because I think it ties in a little bit with what you just were talking about. And again, it's another one of Dr. King's quotes, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and they're applicable to just about any situation you can think of. But I think in relation to that a little bit is he spoke, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And I think that's sort of, we could add to that maybe disrespect cannot drive out disrespect, only respect can do that. And I think that is one of the things that all ties in, I think, to those ideas. And if we all lived by that, regardless of political party or non-party or faith, our community would be better for it, the state would be better for it, our country would be better for it, and certainly the world would be better for it.
All right, thank you, panelists. I think that while they load the last video, I wanted to thank all of our panelists here today. Some of them got thrown in the hot seat sort of at the last minute, so we really appreciate them stepping up. And I also want to thank all of you for all of your questions and your engagement with the topic. Obviously, we are here because we are united in the importance of Dr. King's legacy and his work to empower all of us. And so let's hear some of his final words.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. So that's because I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around. We aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So
As many of you know, that was Dr. King's final speech. And I failed to introduce myself earlier, so for those who don't know me, I'm Reverend Vanessa Cummings. I'm the pastor of Payne Chapel, AME Church here in Kenton. And like they said, we're African, we're Methodist, and we're Episcopal. But we are a church open to all people. And we've decided, for safety reasons, that we're not going to do the march today. I know everybody wants to go out and walk in the snow. I know y'all came excited and prepared for that, but we decided for safety reasons, we did not want to take the risk of having people remember today because they fell. So we want to hold each other up. So we'll symbolically join together when we sing "We Shall Overcome" at the close to allow us to reflect and remember why the marches happen and why we celebrate what we do. I want to say thank you also to the panel, and I'll do all my thanks. I want to give a closing message, and then we'll thank everybody. We'll sing "We Shall Overcome," and we'll bless the food. And please stay and eat and fellowship, because the food is out. I don't know if y'all can smell it, but it's some good stuff back there. And the ladies here have done an excellent job of preparing, so we want to be able to do that. But just for a couple of minutes, I just want to share with you the reason why we march. The March on Washington was a massive movement that took place on August 28, 1963, for jobs and freedom. It took place 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation because blacks still suffer discrimination. The sad but true fact is that today we still face discrimination. We march today to stand and demonstrate our solidarity for equal rights, not just for blacks or African Americans, but for all people. We march for the poor, we march for the disenfranchised, and we march for those whose equal rights are still being denied because of race, color, creed, national origin, or country of origin. We must realize that entitlement is not what many politicians make it out to be. If I pay into an account and expect to get something back, that should not be considered an entitlement. I see entitlements as those who receive without paying their fair share. Those millionaires who pay less income tax or no income tax than you and I, but yet they get better schools, better police protection, more privileges, but they don't pay for them. You and I do, because we are paying income taxes. It's important for us to unify and be empowered because there's strength in numbers. There's strength when people from all walks of life and all ethnicities come together and say, we have had enough. There's power when we're educated on the issues and we don't get caught up in the distractions of tweets and other things that take our eyes off the prize or what really is going on. We're empowered through voter education and then going to the polls and voting. If you don't vote, you don't have a voice. We have to eliminate gerrymandering so that we elect people fairly without political parties being able to control the results by dividing and conquering. We must stop being one-issue voters. We need to know where the candidates stand on all the issues, especially those that directly impact us, our families, our environment, and our communities. If a politician will not communicate with their constituents, or only gives information but will not talk to or respond to those they represent, they are not serving you. You need to vote for people who have a true heart for the people. Candidates who don't change the facts every time they speak. candidates who you may personally know, who have a relationship with God. Let 2018 be a march on the ballot box to elect people who will serve us. People who are not party loyal, but are loyal to the majority of their constituents. Let us go to the ballot box and vote for people who we have put up to run. Those from our community, those who we know and those who know us, and those whom we can hold accountable. When we march, we are showing to this community and to the world that the people of Kenton and Hardin County stand together for equal rights for all people. We march to allow ourselves to reflect on the struggles that the civil rights movement fought for and the battles they fought while being water hosed and pushed back. We stand in unity to say that people from countries with black and brown skin are just as worthy to enter this country as those from European countries. We march to say that we are not going to stand for racial intolerance. As we march, pray, sing freedom songs, and reflect on the power of this movement. Today, nearly 155 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, people of color are still seen as suspects and killed by police. People of color and women do not receive equal pay for equal work. Our schools are still not providing equal educational opportunities, and schools are not receiving equal funding and access to state-of-the-art tools. The Unity Walk and March is not for us to say we did it. It's for us to say we have experienced the movement. We walk to feel the passion of those who marched in 1963 and many years later. Let today's walk and our votes in 2018 be a march and a vote of unity to say that we shall overcome inequality. We shall overcome racism. We shall overcome classism. We shall overcome medical treatments being dictated by insurance companies instead of physicians. We stand against politicians who fail to represent the best interests or concerns of their constituents. A march that represents we as a people in this community shall work to overcome hatred and bigotry, and stand together to lift one another up, to serve one another, and remember that if we have done it to the least of these, we have done it unto God. Thank you. We want to thank Reverend Randall Forster and St. John's Evangelical Church family for the use of their building, the audiovisual assistants for preparing today's meals. And I'm going to say, for those who have already nibbled, we already say thank you for the good food. Yes. And thank you for doing that. We thank Richard and the crew for the audiovisual services that they provided. Let us give all of them and their support for opening the doors. I want to say thank you to, click us again. I want to make sure I don't forget, so this is on the slides. I want to thank the planning committee members, Maya Fishoff, Mary Drzymski-Finn, Michael Hubble, Rob Radway, Marilyn Bothrope, Sarah Brown, and myself. Thank me too. But we want to thank everyone. I want to say a special thank you to Mary. She put together the PowerPoints today for us, and everybody worked. This is a community endeavor. Payne Chapel sponsored this event, And as you see, it was supported by AHEAD, the Hardin County Democrats, Hardin County Republicans, and St. John's Kenton. We had a representative from Ola who was supposed to be here, but due to the weather, she was coming from about 2.5 hours north of here. So due to the weather, she didn't make the trip. She apologized for missing it. She's sorry she couldn't be here. But how often do you get a cross-section of this community in the same room? To talk together, to break bread together, to speak honestly and openly. And that's what Martin Luther King stood for. All of us coming together to say we have to work hand in hand, heart to heart, and build our community up to do what's best for all of us. And I want to say to the League, thank you. I'm a strong advocate of the League. I'm not a paid member anymore, I used to be. But the League of Women Voters, she's got an application, she's gonna get the sign back up, I gotta write my check, and I got a checkbook. But I learned about the League when I was in Oxford, Ohio. I'm from Oxford, Ohio. And I served on city council for 6 years in Oxford. And one of the ways I got known, even though I grew up there, I left for a few years and went to Alabama on roll tide. And then I came back to Ohio, and people said, folks in Oxford don't know you. And I said, I can't figure that one out. But I did everything they talked about. I knocked on doors in every community in Oxford. I asked questions. I found out what the voters wanted to know. I went back and gave them the answers to their questions. I was the most informed person when the League had their voters forum. I knew the answers to the questions because I had knocked on the doors and I had talked to the people, and I knew what the people's concerns were, and I knew what could and couldn't be done. And so I wasn't shucking and jiving, I was speaking the truth. And so that garnered a lot of respect. And I tell people, if you don't know how to vote or what the issues are, get a League of Women Voters voter guide. If you don't know what that is, write it down. League of Women Voters Voter Education Guide. Because that has unbiased, nonpartisan information. They send questions to all the candidates for all the offices. They can answer or not, and if they don't respond, you can decide if you want to vote for somebody who doesn't respect the League enough to respond to the League's questions. But they also tell you all the issues, and they tell you the pros and cons of all the issues. So make it a point, if you haven't been familiar with the League of Women Voters, you don't have to be a woman to be in the League of Women Voters. They're an equal opportunity organization. So I just want y'all to know you can be Baptist, evangelical, Protestant, you can be something else. Amen. You can be in the other category and still be a part of the League. So we just, that's my plug. I don't mean to be biased, but I just want to let y'all know about the League. But we want to thank everybody. I think that's all the thank yous that we have. And thank St. John opened their doors to us and did this to help us out so that we had all the technology that we needed for today. And so we just ask that you stay after we sing and fellowship and talk at the tables or talk to other people about how we can continue this movement.